Hello, everybody. So today's lecture is going to be short. Um, I posted today, I had to adjust the midterm and I wanted to give you guys some more chances to take it. Some people got confused about the points for the essay question that was worth like half of the exam. I'm going to grade those probably after this weekend to give other people a chance to retake it and be patient. You'll get your grades. So, moving into a cool second part of the course where I always leave room for adjustments to do more fun things, what I consider fun things. Hopefully, you find them interesting too. Uh, so, today's lecture is readings about this really interesting story. First, it was a short story in a science fiction magazine. Then it was a comic I think made after the movie. But anyway, short story comic and a movie. Uh, the movie's called They Live, and I think I found the movie to watch for free on Tubi. I'll post that on the module. It's an awesome movie, one of my favorites, called They Live by John Carpenter. So, science fiction, okay? Um, let me see. Let me just share my screen real quick here. What is that? Okay. Just want to see, show you guys kind of like a poster. Well, you can kind of see in the thumbnail. So it's kind of small. Uh, Basically, you can see a little like alien. It's like give you a rundown of the movie. In the movie, the main character, George, he is out of work and he finds a job on a construction site. And there's a church next to the construction site. He explores the church and finds these glasses. Once he puts these glasses on, he can start to see all these like subliminal messaging uh techniques that are being used against people. So he'll uh I'll find a picture of this. He'll be walking around, put on the glasses, and it'll just be a regular advertisement, right? It'll be, you know, smoke cigarettes or take a vacation. And behind it, there'll be a message like obey, consume. He sees this. Yeah. So puts on the glasses. He sees all this work 8 hours, sleep 8 hours, play, consume, watch TV, right? And he starts to see aliens and they notice that he can see. And so they start trying to chase after him. So the movie goes into like a way different direction than um, the short story and the comic. The short story and the comic are pretty similar. I'm posting those. But yeah, the movie is awesome. Okay, so let's see. Okay, this is the comic. So I'm posting this so we can see here. The first page of the comic isn't included. And it's the same as the way the short story starts. He's in a movie theater, not a movie theater, a theater, uh, being hypnotized. And it's like, I guess, this show, and he actually becomes awake and aware, and it like breaks the social program. He starts to see reality. In the movie, he has glasses. In this short story, he can see after he was hypnotized. So we see at the end of the show, the hypnotist told his subjects awake, something unusual happened. One of his subjects woke all the way. This had never happened before. His name was George Nada, and he blinked out at the sea of faces in the theater, at first unaware of anything out of the ordinary. Then he noticed, spotted here and there in the crowd, the non-human faces. the faces of the fascinators. So he starts to see that there are some people that were disguising themselves as people before, but are not. And they're called the fascinators. So in the comic book, they look really kind of goofy. You can see here, they have like a bunch of eyes, but then they can transform into people. Okay. And in the movie they live, they look really wacky. But yeah, you guys can see the image I showed before of the kind of like skeleton alien looking guys. So let's see here. Why are we talking about this? So this idea, hold on, let me stop sharing the screen. Okay, you guys can't see. I don't know if this looks backwards. Structural anthropology. There's this guy, Claude Levi-Strauss. So we're talking about, first of all, the main idea, before we get into Strauss briefly, you can recognize social theory in popular media, stories, myths, right? And I explained to you Durkheim invented sociology, right? Popularized it. And what did he say? If you guys can remember, that religion is the first evidence of human thought through categorizing things that are sacred, special, and profane, average, ordinary, everyday. It's this categorical thinking of opposites that for Durkheim is the first way that humans think, and is the influence of religion is the most powerful. And Peter Berger, we got into only like some of his introductory ideas. The book we read, talking about the social construction of reality, that there's social construction of reality book, but then a couple of those chapters are into his other book called The Sacred Canopy, where he also argues that religion is the the if humans create culture, material and not material, and society holds a special place in that culture because it transmits culture, it allows people to have relationships to spread culture, keeps culture alive. Um, Religion is the most important part of the social world building process. This is Durkheim again, right? Inside this book, Structural Anthropology, we have Levi Strauss, who claims he's not a Durkheimian, but is highly influenced by Durkheim. Uh, you can see elements of structuralism in Durkheim's work. This is a whole like other pathway of theory, right? But the tragedy of this is structuralism, Levi Strauss's work didn't get in translated and popular till the 1960s. So you have these theories that nobody really understood well or were just starting to come out, and they're immediately rejected uh, on the grounds that it was this another European white guy telling everybody what to do. Uh, there's a convoluted messaging. You know, there's like aspects of colonialism in his writing, just critiqued, overly critiqued, and for horrible reasons, right? Some people rejected his work just because they said it sounded too complex, right? That's a horrible reason to reject something. And if you read his work, you have to read it. It's pretty interesting. And what he says, I'll read you a little bit, particularly about myths, right? So we're looking at this fiction story. Science fiction is sort of a modern mythology, right? Because science and technology, when they enter the modern world, people imagine completely different other future realities, right? And this is what Levi Strauss has to say about myths. So let's see. The value of myth is preserved even through the worst translation. Whatever our ignorance of the language and culture of the people where it originated, a myth is still felt as a myth by a reader anywhere in the world. Its substance does not lie in its style, its original music, or its syntax, but in the story it tells. Myth is language functioning on an especially high level where meaning succeeds practically at taking off from the linguistic ground on which it keeps rolling. So he starts to make some claims. Uh, it's pretty interesting, his idea about mythemes. So I'll keep reading. One, if there is meaning to be found in mythology, it cannot reside in its isolated elements which enter into the combination. It's not just a part of the story, but only in a way whose elements are combined, the entire story together. Although myth belongs to the same category as language, being as a matter of fact only part of it, language in myth exhibits specific properties. Those properties are only to be found above the ordinary linguistic level. That is, they exhibit more complex features than those which are to be found in any other kind of linguistic expression. If the above 3 points are granted, at least as a working hypothesis, two consequences will follow. Myth, like the rest of language, is made up of constituent units. These constituent units presuppose the constituent units present in language when analyzed on other levels, but they differ. Uh, he calls these mythemes. Okay, so we'll pause here. There's little chunks of the story that encapsulate meaning that if you analyze a myth, you can see patterns and structure. What does this mean? Okay, again, to remind you, we're reading a fictional story to see some of these ideas that we've been studying in the first part of our course, right? You might say, this is totally going into a tangent. What does this have to do with sociology? It's in the tradition of sociology itself. You guys have seen, hopefully read the yellow wallpaper, right? Gilman is one of the early social theorists, along with Martineau, which we really didn't get to cover. Particularly, Gilman used very successfully the fiction way of telling a story, and that's what she's known for. Her sociological, it worked like so well. People remember her as a writer, but that whole story, The Yellow Wallpaper, is about uh, talking to people about the situation of women, right? How they're trapped, how they're treated like children. And in her more theoretical writing, she explains why and how to stop that, right? If you remember, to become economically independent. So we see in these myths and what we're looking at in science fiction so far about what I've talked about in They Live or 8 o'clock in the morning, right? What's happening in the opening scene? There's the theater. Someone's George Nada. His name means Nada means nothing. He becomes awake in a theater. He starts to see aliens. He starts to see people that are using like hypnotism or mind control on humans and seeing their true form. Already, this should start to like spark some ideas in your mind, right? Think about your assignment is going to be to apply some theories that we've learned, but I'll give you some clues, right? Glasses, I say sociological imagination from Mills are like magic glasses people can wear to see. Remember the formula. Sociological imagination equals history plus biography. And history, it's the social forces in history, and biography, personal biography, right? And They Live, the main character George puts on these glasses and starts to see all this social conditioning through advertising. He starts to see the true nature of the people in control. They're like aliens. This is like the sociological imagination, right? This is also like class consciousness, according to Marx. A worker realizes that the property owner or the property owning bourgeoisie, middle upper class, controls everything, right? It's as if there's like a blindfold lifted, and according to Marx, the worker realizes the power that they have. It's also like magic glasses. So there's other theorists that we can use and put on the lens to view this story. One, we could use Gilman. How does this story depict women? Um, or Du Bois. What kind of skin color do people have in this story? Is it just aliens and white people? Are there people of color left out? Are they in? How are they portrayed? Again, with sex, feminism, how are women portrayed? Um, in your assignment, I'm going to ask you to apply this lens, okay? And going further, Let's see, let me share my screen. This is like, you don't have to do this. I just want to show you an example of like a structural analysis, or what we call, Strauss would call mythemes. So again, I'm just like scratching the surface of this, right? And also, when you get into the humanities and other disciplines, there's more than two, but two ways of interpreting something. We'll like kind of stick to religion. Okay, think about the Bible, right? You have some people that think it's the inspired word of God. Every word in there is true. It's put there, exactly the way it is. That's the way it should be. Or you have the interpretation of, the Bible was created in the context of the history of the time. It's changing. We should interpret it differently in the time we live in, right? There's these different methods of reading that book, right? And there's a main two main styles that kind of like come from those two examples. One is hermeneutics. It sounds strange, hermeneutics. That's translating a text or interpreting it according to a context, right? What does that mean? So if you go and you're a religious studies major studying the Bible, or an English literature studying the Bible, you're going to want to look at, okay, what's the original language? Like the New Testament, Syriac or Hebrew for the Hebrew Bible portions. Um, where are those original documents located? How do different Bibles get arranged? What do we know about the Gospels? The Gospel of John versus the Gospel of Mark. These are supposedly like different Christian communities. People who don't know that will think, oh, these Gospels state different things. They're not true. No, they're just preserved sort of like stories about that community's interpretation of Jesus, right? This is hermeneutics, context, history, source documents, right? The earliest and oldest documents matter. What we're going over, structuralism, is totally the opposite. All versions are valid. The earliest one is not more important. It's There's this structure, there's another way, there's this like secret code inside of the text itself that may not even be known or aware to the person who wrote this fiction book, or we could say religion, right? When talking about the Bible, there's all kinds of interesting interpretations, and codes hidden, like in Psalms. People will use like the letters or parts of Psalms, for different individual prayers, right? There's some people that think there's codes or structures right in the Bible that should be more like a mystical interpretation, right? Um, so in structuralism, take away the example for religion, that I was just talking about, but according to Strauss, there's patterns, and he says there's little ideas called mythemes. So if you look at this document, I have three columns: one, left, center, and middle, right? What does this mean? So this is the short story, all like boiled down to really, really shortened little kernels, right? The order of it is read right to left. So George is in the theater. He becomes awake. He walks the city street, sees the signs. He goes to his apartment, hears the TV. He gets the phone call. He wanders the streets. He sees the homeless person or alien turn into a human. He goes to his girlfriend's apartment. So we have the chronological order, one, two, three, four, five, right? It's right to left and going up to down. But if you see these three columns, left, center, and right, again, you don't have to do this. I just want to show you there's really interesting ways to interpret fiction, religion, and it can reveal patterns that, according to Strauss, is sort of like the unconsciousness of that society, right? We're getting a peek of this social world and a peek of this structure that can tell us things. So, why are there three columns? So, if you notice on the left, we see street, street, city street, right? and we look for patterns. So the first time he walks in the street, he starts to see signs that Fascinator is using uh, their sort of like hypnotism or manipulation in signs on the street. He sees their true form. He's walking again. Then he sees a transformation. So I have like in all caps, like interesting, unique moments, but transformation. Then he sees a person up close transform from alien into a human. He kills this alien. Then on the city street again, this is when he's wandering around after leaving his girlfriend's apartment. And then subway, subway. So all the times he's outside, right? Then in the center, I have all the times he's indoors. And then on the right, it's indoor, but where people live, like a dwelling. So his apartment, girlfriend's apartment, neighbor's apartment. But in the center, it's the theater where he starts. He goes to a bar and sees the TV. And then it ends, he's in a TV studio. So what are some interesting patterns on the city street? I think it's a lot. It's the first time he kills an alien, he gets two items. The items aren't the same in the comic and in the story, right? He's escaping, figuring things out on the run, like literally people are walking on subways and streets going to a place. It's like in between, dealing with him dealing with knowing that like aliens control everything, right? There's a pattern here in the center column. Theater, he becomes aware. It's kind of ironic. Theater, you have like plays. It's a satire or, you know, mythologized fictional storytelling of reality. It's like a mirror. Again, we have another level of like irony. They're doing a hypnotizing show in a theater, right? And George becomes awake and sees how in society there's a mass hypnotism going on. So these interesting like opposites. And then it starts in a theater and it ends in a TV studio. You could argue another theater, right? And he tries to warn people. He says at the very end of the short story in the comic, like, wake up. This is the same thing in the movie. In the movie, it ends in the TV studio. I won't tell you what happens at the end of the movie. You have to watch it. This is interesting too. Studio apartment. He sees a TV. He gets his death command when he's in his apartment. He goes to his girlfriend's apartment. He tries to wake her up, doesn't work. He sees like the neighbor is an alien. He goes, kills the whole alien family, and he then learns. He starts to see the dead bodies of people. He learns that the aliens eat people, right? So this is just one interesting way of ordering the story, right? And you start to see interesting patterns. Okay. Structuralism is very detailed, and we're not really going to get into Levi Strauss, but I want you guys to see in popular culture social theory that we've studied. Already, we can see class consciousness in Marx, sociological imagination in Mills, how women are treated in the story in feminism. Um, George kind of like treats his girlfriend as lesser than, and she can't see. He tries to wake her up and she can't. And also the image of her in uh, her apartment, you'll see how women are depicted, right? Overly sexualized. And in the movie, he doesn't have a girlfriend. It's a girl who works at the TV station. Okay. Um, and we see not really any that I can remember in the comic other humans that are a different race. George has a best friend who actually he helps wake up in the movie, who's black. So we start to see these relationships shift in the movie. So read the short story, read the comic, watch the movie. I'm gonna post, and then I'll post an assignment. Just write 150 words, some social theory, how it applies to the movie. Okay. Or you could be the short story, the comic, or the movie, whatever one you want to talk about. Okay, that's all for now.